Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror and detail, the realm where the shadows whisper ancient secrets and nightmares come to life. I am your guide through the darkness, and on this channel, we delve into the spine-chilling world of werewolf horror stories that will send shivers down your spine. First story. There's a werewolf in my town. I didn't believe in it until recently. I think the sightings first started up about 10 years ago. That's the same time my family moved to this town. I was only 12 at the time. Since then, many have claimed to have seen some sort of wolf or hyena-like animal running around. Supposedly, it roams the forest right next to our neighborhood at night. I went around and interviewed the eyewitnesses. Every description was the same. They said it has thick brown fur and bright blue eyes. It also has the ability to stand on its hind legs and is about my height when fully upright. These sightings are common enough that even the law enforcement officers believe in this werewolf. They say there are no officially recorded wolves or mountain lions or any other similar animals in this area that could explain the sightings. They've also tried to catch it more than once, but it clearly has human-level intelligence, since it has always been able to evade them. And no one knows where it goes during the day. The sightings just seem to get more and more common as the years flew by, to the point where even my parents had claimed to see it once or twice. My mother says she saw it running across a road while driving home from work late at night, while my father said he saw it creeping around our front yard, before leaping over the fence and running back into the woods where it lurks. Everyone in this town claims to have seen this werewolf at some point, except for me. I don't believe in the thing. Why should I? Everyone knows eyewitness accounts are the least reliable form of evidence, since they can easily be fabricated, exaggerated, or misinterpreted. That said, just recently, some extremely convincing physical evidence has been found. For instance, some people have photographed large footprints clearly canine in origin, but much larger than that of a fox or coyote. More gruesomely, hikers have been finding carcasses with their necks and spines violently snapped open with powerful bone-crushing jaws. Ever since these deaths turned up, everyone in town has been keeping their pets and livestock indoors at night for safety, especially since the creature seems to be losing its fear of humans, hence the recent sightings of it in urban areas. One of our elderly neighbors even claimed she saw it digging through her garbage right by her window. She says it turned right in her direction, before going over to the window, pressing its muzzle against the glass and breathing powerful, hungry breaths before she ran to her bedroom, pulled the blanket over her head, and stayed there until morning. After hearing that story, I knew I had to get to the bottom of this. Even if it wasn't a werewolf, there was clearly something in our town wreaking havoc. Maybe a feral dog, or even an escaped hyena that someone was keeping as an illegal exotic pet. I decided I was going to try and catch the creature on film myself, no matter how difficult it would be. I set up a camouflage tent in the backyard, right next to the forest, and brought with me a headlamp, a video camera, and a gun. The latter I brought just in case I needed to defend myself from this animal. I set the camera up on a stand right outside the tent, pointed towards the woods, before crawling into my tent, zipping the door shut, and falling asleep. The next morning, I felt a breeze coming from the front of the tent. I sat up and nearly had a heart attack when I saw that there was a gigantic hole torn in the tent door. I peeked out of the hole and noticed the chewed-up carcass of a turkey lying in front of the tent, along with large paw prints surrounding it. He was here, I thought. I wanted to be excited, but I was mainly terrified. I had been extremely close to being this animal's dinner. The animal had torn open my tent, then for whatever reason, decided I wasn't worthy of a meal. Maybe the videotape will explain everything. I hooked the camera up to my computer and uploaded it before examining the footage. At the very beginning of the video, I saw myself setting the camera up before stepping out of view to get into the tent. The next hour of footage was unfortunately corrupted for whatever reason, so I skipped ahead another few hours. At approximately 3 a.m., I saw a big furry wolf-like creature walk out of the woods, its eyes shining brightly in the dark. It was carrying the same dead turkey from before in its jaws. The creature then walked over to the tent, dropped the turkey to the ground, and reared up on its hind legs like a bear. I felt chills run through my skeleton as the animal leaned forward and disappeared completely from the camera. Not only had it torn open my tent, but it had crawled into the tent with me as I was sleeping. I held my breath, desperately waiting for the animal to come crawling out of my tent and run back to the woods where it came. But it never did. Instead, as the sun rose up over the backyard, I saw myself climb out through the hole in the tent, walk over to the camera, and shut it off. After the footage was over, I felt anxious and confused. Even though that shot of it entering the tent was out of view of the camera, I'd expect to see some sort of movement from its paws as it tore the tent open. It was as if the opening in the tent was already there when it entered the yard. Had it torn the tent open in the corrupted footage? Also, if it had slept with me in the tent the entire night, how come it wasn't there when I woke up? The footage should have shown it going through the opening, and it's not like there was any other way of leaving the tent. Then it hit me. I suddenly remembered all those mornings where I would wake up with dirty hands and feet for no explainable reason, and those mornings where my breath would smell worse than usual, as if I had devoured a whole bunch of rotting meat as a midnight snack. My heart sank. The entire room began to swirl around me as I struggled to stand. All of the pieces were falling into place. Why the creature only appeared at night, while I was sleeping? Why I was the only one in town who had never seen the thing? Why the camera had caught it entering the tent, but not leaving? It turns out, the camera had caught the creature leaving the tent, and that creature was the one who set up the camera in the first place. Second story, the time we saw a werewolf. So, after searching for a bit for a place to submit this where it will be seen, I decided to try it here. This is a 100% true story, and I am using a throwaway in order to provide a little more detail. This story takes place my freshman year of college at the University of Alabama. Since I was living in the dorms, my friends and I would often drive off campus and into the country in order to smoke weed away from RAs and the campus PD. On this particular night, one of my friends and I just finished rolling up a giant blunt and drove off into the night to enjoy it. Once we were far enough away, we went ahead and lit it up and continued to drive throughout the duration of it. After it was finished, we drove into a thick fog, had to drive 5 mph because we literally could not see. We ended up driving out of it and found ourselves in familiar territory. I usually drove away from campus without any real destination, but reflexes, etc., would tend to lead me down the same path. Anyways, we have been here before on previous nights, and there's this creepy stop sign which appears black and unreadable until you are literally 5 feet from it, which we always thought was weird. That has nothing to do with this story, but I tend to ramble, especially when reliving things like this. So after driving out of the fog, we were driving past random houses in the country when we noticed a giant black figure and eyes staring at us from the front of someone's yard. We both did a double take like, "Did you just see that thing?" It was so significant that I 3-point turned my car around to go get a better look. Heading back, I creeped along slowly until we got back to the thing and just stared at it completely silent. At this point, my car was almost to a stop while I stared in amazement at this giant creature. The thing took notice and stood up slowly onto 4 feet, and then onto its hind legs, and I mean this thing was huge. If I were to guess, I would say at least 7 to 8 feet tall. After a couple seconds, it tears off towards us running like a cheetah. Basically, launching itself through the air with its front legs. When I see this, I slam on the gas and start to take off, but the creature reaches the side of my car before I can accelerate fast enough to lose it. It's now on the passenger side of my car, running along with us and staring at my friend through the open window. He's pushing me against the driver's side door in order to give himself distance away from this monster. Judging by the size of my car, and that this thing head was literally staring at us through the window, I would say that it stood 4 to 5 feet tall on 4 legs and had a giant head with huge fangs easily capable of ripping off an arm or one of us out of the car. Eventually, with my foot all the way on the gas while staring at this beast in horror and amazement, we gain enough speed to start pulling away from it, 30 to 40 miles per hour I would guess, and the beast tears off into the woods. We both just sit in silence until we gather ourselves and recount what we saw in order to make sure we both saw the same amazing thing. Some of you may criticize this story since we were both high, but this was an everyday occurrence, and we both saw the same terrifying thing. After analyzing other more likely creatures, I came across this picture of a hairless bear, which honestly does look a lot like what we saw. So who knows? Third story. My son is turning into a werewolf. I love James more than I love life itself. I remember the day I gave birth to him. I looked at that little bundle of human in my arms with pure joy. He was beautiful with hazel brown eyes, just like his late father who, due to a thyroid disorder, passed before he was born. We got along well as just the two of us. Outside of my job, I spent nearly all my time with little James and rarely needed to entrust him to a babysitter. When he was 6, he expressed an interest in the piano when he saw Great Balls of Fire on TV one evening. We bought a baby grand within a month and had a music teacher come over once a week. He was a fast learner and I could see him playing at concert halls as an adult. At school he was no different. He was a smart, well-behaved boy all through elementary school. At parent-teacher conferences, his teachers were sure to tell me what wonderful manners he had and how he was sure to always raise his hand before speaking. He was a pleasure compared to other more rambunctious boys, they would tell me. He wasn't your typical dirt-ridden little boy either. He was practically Victorian in how prim and proper he acted. Never would there be grass stains found on his knees. Never would he have to be told to take off his shoes before entering the home. He kept himself and the area around him clean as could be. That is until recently. Ever since he started junior high, I noticed he's been messy. His hair, that is now kept longer, nearly shoulder length, is disheveled and his clothes often have holes in them. About a month ago, I politely reminded him he was due for a haircut. The only response I received was a grunt. I looked a little closer at him and realized a shave might be in order too. At dinner, he ate his food in a hurry, often chewing with his mouth open. And let me tell you, he ate a lot, sometimes requesting third helpings of pasta and bread. When he made these requests, his mouth was often full of food. His manners had nearly fully dissolved. When I was doing the laundry, I had to use spot cleaner on his clothes for the various stains found. This was never needed before, but was another changed trait found in my previously spotless boy. On top of it all, he asked to cancel his piano lessons and now refuses to play anymore. The baby grand sits here unloved and unappreciated. Soon his temperament became apparent even to his teachers. He brought home a teacher's note that I had to sign. He had received detention for cursing at his history teacher, F-word in case you're wondering. James tried to assure me it wasn't a big deal, but some kind of punishment had to be doled out. I settled on grounding him for a month and hoped that would set him straight. Well, that's when he really done it. A few days after this, I woke up in the middle of the night and noticed his bedroom door slightly ajar. I looked inside and his bed appeared suspiciously flat. Out of anger at what I suspected, I ripped the blankets off the bed and confirmed he was gone. It was past midnight, and his curfew was a solid 9 p.m. Not to mention he was grounded. I didn't want to disturb anyone at such an hour, but I had to find out where he was and thought to call a few of his friends. As I picked up the phone, I heard a car door slam. I went to the front door to see him walking up the driveway. Before he had a chance to enter, I swung open the door and gasped at him under the patio light. What I saw was not what any mother would expect from a 13-year-old boy. His face was nearly completely covered in thick hair other than a small area around his eyes. I was speechless for a moment while I stared at him. I looked past him and towards the car that dropped him off and saw a girl at the steering wheel driving off. "James, what?" I started. "Nothing, Mom. Jesus. I was just out with a friend," he responded as though everything was perfectly natural. He pushed past me. Before he could get to his room, I grabbed his arm, only to immediately let go in horror. What I felt beneath my palm was an unnatural coarseness. His arm was covered in hair. No, this was not hair. This was fur. I looked closer at his torso, and I realized his shirt was torn at the neck seam. My eyes moved further down and my heart nearly stopped when I spotted what looked like a small stain of blood on his jeans. He shoved my arm away with his hand, and I let out a shriek when one of his long nails scratched my arm. "Ow, James, you clawed me. What happened to you? Will you leave me alone?" he shouted while slamming his bedroom door shut. I stood outside the door for a moment, but I was too scared to open it. Besides, I knew what I had to do. Teenage boys with this condition would only become more out of control as they developed into men. So I went to the kitchen and grabbed a knife. I'm now in my bedroom with my butcher knife on my lap. I know what you are thinking. You're thinking I raised him wrong. I raised a nice, good boy. What he has is a disorder. The disorder is leakinism, and count yourself lucky if you've never experienced it firsthand. He's nearly full werewolf now, and I know only one tried and true way to cure it. Fourth story. One of us is the werewolf. I always had an overactive imagination. And yeah, I could get over emotional. Not to mention I was always fucking weird. So I guess I couldn't blame the people of Stanwyck, Georgia, when they didn't believe a werewolf killed my family. No, not many people believed me. Ashley Nelson, the quiet geek, a tall, fit black girl. Even then, I was lonely and constantly alienated by my classmates. My long wavy black hair and big brown eyes always besieged by restless mannerisms. Regardless of my quirky fashion and cute glasses, I had a social anxiety I could never harness, a low self-esteem I constantly struggled with, and a quick temper I constantly suppressed. But on that awful April night, my issues were overshadowed by tragedy. At 16, what little innocence I had was forever shattered. The police came to my house around midnight, way too late to save my parents or younger brother Chris from the monster, and way too late to save me from the paralyzing trauma. Our house was a mess, a crime scene closer to a slasher movie than anything resembling real life. Blood and flesh were our new wallpaper. Severed limbs and scattered organs our new furniture. This was a redecoration job sculpted by Slaughter, and I was the sole survivor, found cowering alone in my room, covered in blood with a few cuts.
No bruises.
No serious injuries. And yet the police didn't believe my story. Hardly anyone believed me when I said a werewolf killed my family. But ultimately, I wasn't charged for the massacre. Instead, I was set free to the wild, free to an unforgiving public. After the summer, my senior year crawled by. Now living with my grandparents, I really had no one to turn to. Not my parents, not Chris. I was alone and against the world. Even Grandma and Granddaddy never talked to me. Like prison guards, they just kept watch over me behind suspicious glares. Then again, so did all of Stanwick High. I was the girl who literally cried wolf. Now I was even more hated by my classmates, even more ostracized. And needless to say, my teachers and counselors were less than supportive. In the span of a few months, I'd gone from being ignored to outright despised. From alienated Ashley to the wolf girl. Anonymous internet death threats became normal, as did all those dirty looks in public. I was constantly called wolf bitch by Carol Lane and her preppy best friends. I guess I should have been glad I was never charged. There was no evidence against me. I talked to the cops. I told them what happened. How I could do nothing but run to my bedroom. That by the time the werewolf ripped open Chris's innards, my parents were long dead, and I could do nothing. I couldn't help it if I was lucky enough to survive. While I escaped the lycanthrope, I couldn't escape the suspicion. I heard everyone's excuses, everyone's theories. I heard them whispered behind closed doors, shouted on TV, or in all caps on Reddit. All the stories that I was a crazy geek who enjoyed horror movies a little too much. Nobody believed me except my boyfriend Patrick. He was soulful and introspective. With messy brown hair and bright green eyes, Patrick was cute but quirky. The same height as me at 5 feet 8 inches and a total weirdo as well. Even so skinny, he still had a nice body. And to top it off, Patrick loved writing scary stories. I guess our shared creativity helped fuel our passionate relationship, not to mention our shared love of horror. Patrick had actually been at my house before I saw the werewolf. He left before nightfall, before the monster left my family in pieces. And like me, Patrick had been questioned by the police, and also suspected by almost everyone here in Stanwick. The constant hatred made Patrick and I feel like outlaws at 17. But we did the best we could. And through it all, I loved Patrick and always depended on him. Especially since he was the only person who believed me. Patrick was my therapy. And of course, the sex was passionate. Patrick made sure of that. But through all the negativity, we had each other. And that was all I needed. By the middle of September, Patrick and I were surviving the torturous prison sentence that was senior year. We were doing okay, until Carol Lane got a hold of us. Right after third block, she stopped us during our march to the library. "Hey, Ashley," Carol's playful southern accent yelled. Helpless, Patrick and I stopped right outside the library, cornered by Carol. Under the dim lighting, we knew no one would be near the library or its long untouched books to help us. Like a gang leader, Carol led her army toward us. All of them were dressed in uniform. All of them in tight name-brand ripped jeans and even tighter name-brand shirts. There was Carol Lane in all her blonde-haired, blue-eyed Southern belle glory. Carol the future prom queen, future valedictorian, and current bitch. Her boyfriend Roy nothing more than an eye-candy distraction. He was a dumber and taller version of Carol, complete with big muscles, curly blonde hair, and flawless skin. Just the type of meathead dunce Carol would likely dump after graduation for smarter, hotter men. Behind the couple lurked their hangers-on, Frank, Jean, and Becky. Frank and Jean were the B-list couple to Stanwick High royalty like Carol and Roy. Yeah, they were attractive, but not quite as hot or rich as their idols. Frank was pale with dark hair, social but too corny and silly to be funny. Jean was a light-skinned black girl with big glasses, strong-willed with a long, lean figure. And then there was Becky. I figured she was the ugly one of the bunch. But then again, with her long, coiffed black hair, I guess she was kinda cute behind the extra pounds and thick makeup. Probably could have been much prettier if her self-esteem or fame from being Carol's childhood friend would allow it. Or if Becky wasn't such a grade A cunt. We just wanted to invite y'all to my party, Carol told us. She exchanged smiles with Roy. Just a little get-together at my house. Yeah, it'll be fun, Becky chimed in, excitement in her squeaky voice. Carol shined her glowing blue eyes toward me. We'd like to get to know you more, Ashley. Showing remorse, she paused. A fresh start. Nervous, I looked at Patrick. I like to think I wasn't starstruck by these assholes, but I was. I couldn't say a word. Couldn't tell Carol and her cronies what a pack of assholes they'd been, nor could I tell them to fuck off. Instead, my mind went blank. Honestly, I'd always had a hard time standing up for myself, much less when I was being confronted by Stanwick High royalty. Patrick just flashed me a confident grin, totally unfazed by the cool kids. Maybe we should go, he said. He helped me shake off the silence. I don't know, I said. I faced Carol. It's at your house? Yeah, Carol answered with equal parts friendliness and exuberance. It'll be chill, I promise. I hesitated. I don't know. I could feel the clique's collective pretty eyes beaming on me like spotlights. Just let me think about it. With a delicate but persuasive touch, Patrick squeezed my hand. Nah, we'll go. Struggling to suppress my anxiety, I glared at Patrick, but his confident smile, his sheer handsomeness crushed my anger. Carol and her gang lit up with smiles of perfect white teeth. Good, Carol said. Be at my house around 5. Still conflicted, I confronted Carol. That's kinda early, isn't it? I asked. Not really, she replied. Carol glanced at her comrades for the support she could always count on. That's what time we usually start. Yeah, that gives us more time to party, Jean added. FO show. I heard Becky squeal. To my dismay, Patrick didn't fight back. Well, we'll be there, he said. My self-conscious insecurities kept me from groaning right there on the spot. Not only was I a prisoner at Stanwick High, now I'd be trapped at Carol's house on a Friday night. Before I could persuade Patrick, Carol rode her gang off into the sunset. Back to the wilderness of our high school cafeteria. We'll see y'all there. Carol yelled toward us. For emphasis, Roy let out a playful howl. A call of the idiots. Patrick, what the hell was that? I muttered, annoyed. Patrick smiled at me, his cuteness a temporary remedy for my dread. What? He said. It's just a party, babe. A party from hell, I grumbled. Patrick's left hand caressed my face. Look, we'll have fun, all right? I got lost in his green eyes. Yet another cure for my constant worry. And if it sucks, we'll just leave early, Patrick continued. I guess he had a point. From what I'd heard, Carol had a Lake Douglas mansion, an isolated fortress by the water. And she also had a shitload of Jose Cuervo. At the very least, Patrick and I could attend for the booze, and hopefully get too fucked up to have to deal with any of Carol's bullshit. So I let Patrick drive us over there. His car was easily the ugliest one in the long paved driveway, but we didn't care. By now, both Patrick's chill mood and our little pre-gaming helped me relax. Walking hand in hand, Patrick led me up to Carol's garage door, right past all the lovely cars and cute lawn ornaments. Like a South Georgia Hollywood, Lake Douglas had hills, privacy, and a variety of million-dollar views. And Carol's 2-story house was no exception to the neighborhood's luxurious standards. Inside, I was surprised by the low-key party. Not that it was lame or lacking. It was just more chill than I expected. Instead of sorority-like antics or frat house theatrics, all of us just sat in the living room's many recliners and sofas. Just me, Patrick, Carol, and the rest of her tight-knit clique. The five of them still wore their expensive uniforms while Patrick and I rocked our colorful thrift shop finds. My Caribbean blouse a stark contrast to their pretty blandness. On the huge flat screen, top 40 music videos played at a low volume. In the corner, a small bar featured Carol's notorious treasure chest of alcohol. A hallway connected the living room to all the bedrooms. Small town ornaments gave the house a wholesome charm, while large picture frames showed off photos of Carol and her eternally on vacation parents. The frames represented a sprawling chronology of Carol Lane from innocent baby to conceited teenager. The booze was potent, strong, and absolutely fucking amazing. This wasn't PBR or Natty Light. You got what you paid for here at Lake Douglas. Throughout the party, everyone stayed in their zones. Outside of pedestrian conversations, no one amongst us outcasts and preps dared cross over to the other side. Not that I minded. As the hours went by, Patrick and I were having fun just chillin' and listening to music. Around 7, I stole a glance out a window. The sun was beginning to fade, and once darkness hit, I suspected Carol's calm garden party would turn into a rowdy nightclub, one I was eager to escape. Carol stood up and muted the flat screen. All eyes went to her as she placed her humongous purse on top of the TV. Like she was ready to deliver a toast, Carol held up her red plastic cup. "I'm glad everyone could make it tonight." She displayed a wicked smile. "We have quite the special event in store." Confused, I faced Patrick. "Special event?" I asked, my voice louder due to the booze. Cackling, Roy pointed at us. "It's just for you, Ashley." "Just for Ashley," Jean shouted with drunken enthusiasm. The anxiety roared through me, even through the liquor. "Patrick, what are they talking about?" Patrick's hand caressed my arm, but not even that could soothe my swirling unease. "It's okay, babe," he said. Carol motioned toward the windows. "Becky, close the blinds." At Carol's command, Becky lowered all the heavy blinds, squashing the stray sunlight. A few ceiling lights were now our only solace in this upper-class cavern. Awkward, I looked all around us. Carol's gang now gathered by the TV. "I don't understand," I said. I looked at Patrick's calm face. "What's going on?" His grip tightened around my arm. "Babe, just relax."
No.
I pulled away from him and confronted the preps. "What the hell is this?" "We're trying to help you, Ashley," Carol said in a moderate but authoritative tone. Roy pulled Carol in toward him. "Yeah, we gotta catch a werewolf." Like a laugh track, all their friends forced a chuckle. I placed my cup on the floor and stood up, my mind somewhere between outraged and intrigued. "Is this a fucking joke?" I asked. My voice came off weak. I was nothing more than an intimidated mess. Sensing my unease, Patrick grabbed my hand. "Babe, they're serious." "What?" Patrick stood next to me. "I already talked to them, Ash. They want to help, that's all they want to do." He leaned in closer. "I know you weren't lying, babe. I always knew, and now we're gonna prove it." Carol strutted up to us. "At first, I didn't believe you." She stopped right in front of me, her poise the polar opposite of my defensive demeanor. "But then I figured it out." "We all did," Jean added. "So you've seen him?" I asked, excited. I stole a look at the lineup of cool kids. For once, even Roy was serious. "You'll really believe me?" "Yep," Becky retorted. "We know the truth, Ashley," Carol said. "A werewolf did kill your family." Feeling relief, I struggled to suppress my tears. My emotions went wild. "It wasn't your fault," Carol added. Reassuring me, Patrick kissed my temple. "I told you, babe." Carol walked toward her purse. "But there's only one thing." What? I asked. Veering from polite host to wicked competitor, Carol confronted me. One of us is the werewolf. A deathly quiet overtook the room, the entire house. No one said a word, not a sliver of a smirk on any of their attractive faces. I didn't know whether to laugh or cringe or hell, even shiver. I looked over at Patrick. I don't understand. What the fuck? Nah, it's cool, Patrick replied. She's serious. Through the confusion, I couldn't respond. Couldn't do anything except just stand there. I did a little investigating, Carol said. She reached inside her purse. None of us had an alibi for that night. I stepped toward her. But how do you know someone is the werewolf, Dash? The sight of Carol pulling out a pistol made me stop dead in my tracks. The weapon was old but in mint condition. A real Colt .45 revolver. One fully capable of taking out all 7 of us. Oh shit, I yelled. No one else looked surprised. They didn't even flinch. And deep in my unsettled gut, I realized they expected the gun. You're fine, Ashley, Carol said in a cool voice. She placed the gun right next to her purse. There's already silver bullets in it. So what? I struggled to say through the shivers. You're just gonna shoot whoever changes? Carol's face took on a new layer of intensity. A Southern belle gone mad. Exactly, she said. I scanned the scene for help, but like a morbid Greek chorus, everyone wore the same somber expressions. Even Patrick. His green eyes now looked darker, hazier, as if the party's sudden shift had subdued his soul. But this is crazy, I said. Supportive, Patrick grabbed my hand. You'll be safe, babe. Unless she's the werewolf. Becky blurted out with glee. I wanted to call her an ugly bitch, but I didn't. Not when everyone kept staring at me. Patrick glared at Becky. That could be any one of us. Annoyed, Becky pointed at me. Well, she's the one who survived. I'd put my money on her. And what if it's you, huh? Patrick yelled. What if you killed her family? His burst of a response silenced Becky, but it didn't stop those harsh stares stuck on us. Look, let's just calm down, Carol said. She strolled up next to Roy. We'll just wait and see. She looked toward the windows. Even with the blinds blanketing the darkness, I could tell nighttime was upon us. I could feel it. Once the full moon's at its peak, we'll open the blinds, Carol continued. She confronted me. Then we'll see the werewolf, Ashley, just like you did. Trembling, I backed away. No, we need to go, Dash. But Patrick held me there. Patrick, I said. He looked into my eyes. You need to see, Ashley. I struggled to pull away but had no chance at escaping his staunch grip.
No.
Let go of me. Ashley, please. His emerald eyes begged me to stay. They made me a prisoner to the party. You need the closure, Patrick told me in a gentle tone. You can't keep running away. I looked at everyone else. Carol's clique was cooler than ever. Each and every one of them showed no weakness, no fear. Tonight, everyone will believe you. Ash, Patrick said. You don't have to be afraid. I looked back at him. They'll believe you, he said, just like I do. Carol clapped, grabbing everyone's attention. All right, I think it's time. Will you do the honors, Becky? Staying close to Patrick, I watched Becky step toward the first window. A dread rather than anticipation built up inside me. Roy grabbed a hold of Carol's hand. Wait, do we have to do it right now? He asked, unease piercing through his confidence. Annoyed, Carol pulled away from him. Yeah. With subtle panic, Roy snatched Becky's arm. Hey, just wait a fucking-us. Frank gave him a weird look. Dude, what's wrong? Like a defensive animal, Roy staggered back toward the hallway. A defiant glare overtook his handsome face. Shit. Nothing. All right. I just think we should wait until later. Carol watched him with nothing but sheer suspicion. Why? The full moon's already out, dumbass. Goddamn it, Carol. Roy shouted. Just fucking listen to me. Scoffing, Carol pushed Becky over toward the window. Nah, fuck that. I watched Becky stop in front of the window. Clear unease made her hesitate, and I couldn't blame her. Look, I just want us to be safe, Roy said to Carol, his voice featuring more rage than concern. I felt Patrick wrap his arm around me. What are you so afraid of, Roy? Patrick hurled at him. Startled, everyone looked at my boyfriend, shocked to hear him challenge one of Stanwyk's prize jocks. Roy glowered. Hey, you and your creepy-ass girlfriend can shut the fuck up. Jean pushed Frank over toward Roy. I don't need y'all creeps accusing me of shit. Roy continued. My tower of anxiety grew even higher. Hey, leave her alone, asshole. Patrick yelled at Roy. Trying to play peacemaker, Frank grabbed Roy's arm. Dude, chill. Roy broke away from him. Nah, man. Fuck that. He went for the gun. I ain't doing this shit. Concerned, Carol rushed toward him. Roy. Roy's glare latched onto me, especially with that crazy bitch. Motherfucker. Patrick yelled. He lunged at Roy, but I held him back. All the while, the anger boiled up inside me. But no matter what, I couldn't unleash it. I couldn't let my inner beast out. Rather than exposing the fury within, I could only stay silent in Patrick's arms. Right before Roy grabbed the gun, Carol snatched his wrist. What the hell's wrong with you? She shouted. Amidst their struggle, I saw Jean shove Frank toward them once more. Stop, Carol, Roy yelled. Like a guard restraining an asylum inmate, Frank ambushed Roy, grabbed both his arms. Stop, man, Frank pleaded. Carol glared at Becky. Becky hadn't moved this whole time, too scared to raise the blinds. Open the blinds, Carol demanded. Carol's voice forced Becky out of her fearful state. Okay, she cried. With a trembling hand, Becky reached toward the lift cord. Nervous, I looked at Patrick, but his stoic calmness failed to soothe me.
No.
Roy screamed at Becky. Frank struggled to hold him in place. God damn it, Roy. Be careful, the concerned Jean shouted at Frank. Becky grabbed the cord. With a scratchy snarl, Roy shoved Frank across the room. Frank, Jean cried. Startled, Becky collapsed back against the wall. A scared mess who damn sure wasn't gonna open those blinds now. In a terrifying display of strength, Roy turned and bolted for the hallway, his movements so manic, his howls murky and unsettling. My stomach sank to the floor. The noises harkened me back to past trauma, back to the werewolf's wails, back to my family's tortured screams. What the fuck? Carol yelled. Jean helped Frank off the ground. Oh God, are you okay? She said, concerned. Then Roy's animalistic cries rang through the house. Nothing but his howls and snarls hit us on a horrifying loop. Acting on simultaneous courage and stupidity, Frank snatched the gun. Jean reached toward him. Frank, just stay here, Frank said. He ran toward the hallway, straight toward another harrowing howl. What the hell are you doing? Carol cried after him. Within seconds, Frank had disappeared into the upper-class jungle, the snarling and Frank's frenetic footsteps all we could hear. Frank, Jean yelled. She stepped toward the hallway. Carol restrained her. No, don't. Frank, come back, Jean shouted. Like a timid soldier, I did my best to stagger off toward the window, further away from those sounds. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Becky slouch to the ground. She covered her ears in a pathetic attempt to quash those nocturnal howls. Patrick looked toward me, worried. Ashley. A sudden scream surrounded us. A human scream.
No.
Frank. Jean yelled. Acting off adrenaline, she pushed Carol away and followed her boyfriend's cries. Carol pulled Becky off the ground. Carol's intense blue eyes zeroed in on me. Come on. Patrick grabbed a hold of my hand. Together, we followed after two preps, Patrick and I lagging behind in this long, dark hallway. By now, Frank's screams had faded off into an unnerving silence. All I could hear was footsteps and the occasional guttural growl. Then a loud thud echoed toward us. I jumped upon hearing it, and I could feel Patrick do the same. Up ahead, I saw Carol drag Becky through an open door on the left. Come on, Ashley. I heard Carol shout. At the open doorway, I felt Patrick let go of me. Patrick! I cried. Turning, I caught a brief glimpse of his uneasy face. Babe dash, I started. Carol's groomed hand yanked me inside. I stumbled inside the study. A large desk sat in the center of the room. Several antique bookshelves lined up against the wall, all of them crammed with hardbacks and more cherished photos of Carol Lane. A huge window overlooked Lake Douglas. The blinds were lifted, revealing a glorious full moon shining upon us. Its beams so bright, the remnants strayed into the hallway. I stopped at the desk, right by Becky and Carol. Near the window, I saw Jean crying over a bloodied body. Frank was sprawled out like a red snow angel. Crimson ran all along his face and torn t-shirt. Frank the victim of a most brutal attack. The revolver laid a few feet away. Silver bullets and all. Oh God! Becky shouted. He's dead. Horrified, I turned toward the door. In desperate search of Patrick, Carol snatched my arm in a death grip. Ashley, look out! Like a cheesy horror sound effect, a howl roared to life right behind me. One more befitting monster mash than an American werewolf in London. Whirling around, I saw a creature rise up behind the desk. Roy had transformed. His face replaced by pointy ears, a long snout, spurts of thick black fur, and two hungry red eyes. Snarling, he lunged at me. I screamed and tumbled to the ground, right by Frank's dead body. Another corny howl pierced my ears. Scared shitless, I reached for the gun. Until I got a closer look at this teenage lycanthrope, Roy still had on his flawless name-brand t-shirt and jeans. His muscular arms and legs completely unscathed by excessive hair. Roy's howling shifted from campy spookiness to howling laughter. Then more laughing surrounded me, and I saw now everyone was chuckling and pointing at me. Carol, Jean, Becky. Even Frank sat up, the fake blood unable to drown out his mean-spirited cackle. Oh shit, we got her. Jean cried out. Like an invisible force, the heavy laughter combined with the mask's narrow eye sockets made Roy stagger against the desk. Who? He yelled. That bitch got scared quick. I sat there on the verge of tears, my self-conscious soul on the verge of suicide. The hurt sunk into my flesh like sharp hooks. I couldn't say anything. Carol pulled Jean off the ground. Frank, too dominated by drunken amusement to even stand on his own. Well, Carol began. Trying to control her sadistic laughter, she pointed over at Roy. There's your werewolf, Ashley. Leaving his mask on, Roy raised his arms and lumbered toward me. His act about as creepy as an intoxicated straggler leaving a Halloween party. His howls now more obnoxious than ever. I cringed at the silly sight. The girl who cried wolf, Jean quipped. Indeed, Carol replied. Chuckling, Becky walked over toward the window. A closer glance at the full moon. Y'all got her good, she said to an audience of none. Still reeling from the scare, I crawled back toward the door. I realized teardrops were sliding down my face. And like always, I couldn't fight back. I really was gonna weep like a scared child in front of the cool kids. The gang's giggling only grew louder. A laugh track well off the rails. A live studio audience for my pitiful state. With obnoxious glory, Carol pointed right at me. Hey y'all, she just saw another wolf. Looks like it, Frank quipped. A booming snarl ended their laughter real quick. Now fear latched into all of them. Outright terror. Everyone watched the beast lunge into the study. A muscular werewolf walking on its furry hind legs. The creature's brown fur was brisk and spiky. Its ears long and slender, just like the monster's intimidating snout. In the room, the werewolf flashed us a smile of razor-sharp teeth. Its eyes redder than the fake blood scattered across Frank's body. Only tattered clothes were stuck to the werewolf's army of fur. And like huge retractable blades, eager claws extended out of its hands. I recognized those hipster clothes. And even from here, I could tell the creature was exactly my height. Panicking, Roy grabbed Carol. Oh fuck! His muffled voice yelled through the mask. Before Carol could scream, one quick swipe from the creature declared a double decapitation. Carol and Roy's heads tumbled to the ground. Their severed necks erupted like volcanoes of dark red gore. Roy's dying eyes looked on at me. Sticky blood covered the mask's cheap fur. The plastic ears now crooked and bent. His mask a pathetic counterpart to the real thing standing before us. I watched the other teens scream in horror. And for once, I was glad my self-doubt kept me from taking action. Especially since it kept me from helping these assholes. Right now, I was one entertained audience. There was Frank reaching for the Colt .45. Only the werewolf's bare foot splattered Frank's head into a busted jack-o'-lantern of gooey flesh. Screaming, Jean and Becky rushed toward the door. The werewolf's bellowing snarl ushered them into a frenzied panic. Both girls kept stumbling into one another. Their attempt at escape so sloppy. Get out of my way, bitch. Jean yelled. She pushed Becky back, straight into the clutches of the creature. Becky cried out. Her squeaky scream silenced once the werewolf jammed its paw straight down her throat. Blood sprayed across the monster's hungry face. It retrieved its paw in a quick flourish, yanking out all sorts of intestines. A goodie bag of Becky's organs. Becky's corpse hit the floor, her mouth agape in a huge oval. A wide enough opening for a red river to come rushing out. Right when Jean reached the open door, the werewolf snagged her back in. Its tight grip sunk straight into her fragile flesh. No, she cried. The monster turned her around. A brief taunt of deep breaths and sloppy saliva hit Jean's face. She cringed in helpless fear. She knew she was fucked, and all she could do was scream and scream again. The werewolf went to town on her vulnerable face. A machine of chomping ensued. The monster's mouth quicker and messier than a blender. Jean's screams died even as remnants of her mouth kept twitching. Her flesh an all-you-can-eat buffet devoured in mere seconds. As the werewolf finished literally defacing my classmate, I reached out and grabbed the gun. I staggered to my feet. Through the tears, my gaze strayed toward the window. The lift cord for the blinds was well within reach. Victorious, the monster threw down Jean's body. She landed with a splat near all the others. Now all their blood intertwined. The 5 bodies laying side by side in a prep cemetery. I stared at the werewolf. Deep down, I knew I'd never seen it before. This wasn't the monster that killed my family. Or at least, I didn't think it was. My trembling hand did its damnedest to hold the gun in a tight grip. "Patrick!" I yelled out, my tone strong and steady for once. Drawn to my voice, the creature confronted me. Even behind the terrifying exterior, I knew Patrick recognized me. His eyes always gave away his emotions, even when they were red instead of green. Breathing heavy, Patrick stepped toward me. His ominous footsteps splashed through multiple red puddles. I pointed the gun right at him. But who was I kidding? Patrick didn't even flinch, much less slow down. He knew I couldn't pull the trigger. I took a deep breath and wiped away my tears. "I love you," I said to him. Reaching out, I pulled the cord. Fifth story. I think I'm turning into a werewolf. "Oh, my God," Sophie said, and fell back against the sheets, exhausted. "I haven't been fucked like that since I was a little girl." I fell down next to her, panting as well, and laughed. "Sophie, that's terrible." I grabbed the pillow from beneath my head and hit her with it, and her breasts jiggled. "What can I say? You bring out the worst in me." She smiled beneath her messy hair, moist with sweat. "Ha, don't I know it?" I smiled back. "You'll pay for that. Later." Sophie threw the pillow back, and it hit me in the face. We fell asleep, and when we woke up the evening had turned night. "Damn," I said. "Now my sleep cycle's going to be all messed up." Sophie got out of bed and got dressed. She slipped on her watch and looked at its face. "Double damn. I'm going to be late for Lydia's party." She pulled her sweater over her head. "I've got to run, dear, but it's been smashing as always." She bent down to kiss me, and I kissed her on the lips. "Of course, always too busy for little old me," I said wistfully. "Sigh, what is a boy to do?" I put the back of my hand up against my forehead dramatically and laughed. She stuck out her tongue at me. "By Tommy. By Sophie." I got dressed and headed out to the bar. I was meeting Jack at 10. It had started to rain, and the night felt cold and alive, earlier than it was. It was when I passed by the alley on 73rd next to that Chinese restaurant. The narrow one that somehow seemed extra dark and always freaked me out ever since I had started noticing it, that I heard a strange noise. It sounded like a mix between a yelp and a growl. I stopped in my tracks, not knowing whether to investigate or run. My choice was made for me, though. A woman stumbled out of the alley. The sight of her made my blood run cold. She was wearing a shredded tank top and jeans, both soaked in blood. She had blood in her hair, and on her face too. There was so much of it that it was pooling down by her feet. I wanted to call out to her, but my voice was stuck in my throat. She didn't need me to say anything, though. She was already making her way over to me. "Are you hurt?" I managed to whisper, but the look on her face answered that for me. It wasn't a look of pain or fear. It was a look of determination, of anger, of hatred. It was then that I began wondering if the blood was hers or someone else's. I panicked, fearing for my life. I should have run. I know that now. But hindsight is 20/20ths. I guess the adrenaline made me think that I was stronger than her. Plus, I thought to myself, what if she is hurt and needs help? Did I really want to walk away from someone who could be dying? She was only a few feet away from me when she fell to the ground. I should have asked her if she was okay. I should have said that I was going to get help. I should have ran. But I didn't. I did the opposite. I walked up to where she was sitting, and I crouched down next to her. That was where everything went wrong. Suddenly, the woman jumped up, and before I could move, she threw me to the ground. My vision turned starry as a searing white pain burst through my skull. I only partially saw her face as she bent towards me. I couldn't tell if it was just the blurriness, but were her teeth sharpened? Now is not the time to worry about people's dental hygiene. I reminded myself, trying to pull myself away from whoever this crazy bitch was. My head immediately disagreed, screaming in agony. The woman barked out a laugh above me. There was nothing else I could do but slowly, pathetically, painfully try to drag myself across the sidewalk and as far away as possible. With every shift of my body, she took a patronizing step towards me.
Ashit.
I finally hit the wall. She started bending down towards me again. I tried to scream, but all that came out was a low moan. I was powerless against whatever she was going to do. Without warning, her head jerked hard to my neck and ripped at the skin, leaving a huge, gaping wound as her nails dragged down my chest. I don't remember if I physically screamed, but mentally I have never been louder. A few more bites, and I was on the verge of passing out. From the distance, somebody screamed, and all I could think in my fucked up state was, same. For some reason, the woman attacking me seemed off-put by this and got up, slinking back into the alley, tripping onto her hands and knees as she did. As red and blue flashes soon came into my quickly fading vision, I realized that somebody must have called the police or an ambulance. I vaguely noticed two people run over to with some sort of contraption, and they began to lift me up onto it. There, I whispered, trying to point to the alleyway, but my arm falling miserably to my side. What? One of the people said. The woman. I slurred out. They didn't seem to understand. It's all right, sir. We're going to take you to help. I kept trying to tell them who attacked me, but to no avail, as I passed out almost as soon as they rolled me into the ambulance. I woke up in a hospital bed with no recollection of anything that had happened the night before. Very slowly, the pieces started to fill in. I tried to sit up, but there was so much pain everywhere that I immediately collapsed again. Rendered immobile, all I could do was wait for someone to come check in on me. What felt like forever later, I noticed two people standing outside my door. I didn't recognize them, but I could recognize that they seemed to be arguing over something. Eventually, the man ran his hands over his face before quietly stepping into my room. "Tommy," he said, "good to see you awake."
I'm Dr. Engelman.
What? I couldn't manage any more words than that. I truly was exhausted. Yes, there are quite a few things to tell you. Would you like the good news first, or the bad news? Good news, I croaked out through a parched mouth and cracked lips. I saw his eyebrows raise a fraction as he ticked off a box that read, cognizant and responsive. He looked back up at me and saw my eyes on his clipboard, which he turned so that I couldn't read it. Well, Tommy, the good news is that we saved your life. You will recover all your motor functions and mostly lead a normal life. He stopped talking and looked at me. Bad news? I croaked, drinking some water. Well, not sure exactly how bad it is, or if it is entirely bad. There is quite a bit of cosmetic scaring from the animal attack, and once we get you fit enough to leave of your own recognizance, or a family member comes to get you, we can discuss some options in that respect. Now, the odd news. The animal that attacked you seems to have infected with what seems to be some sort of benign form of rabies. I sat up suddenly in shock. The doctor placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. Tommy, please, relax. I said it was benign, which means we believe it is harmless. I was still skeptical, and Engelman could see it, plain as day, on my face. We treated you while you were unconscious for rabies. That's part of the muscle soreness you're feeling, and it seems to have paid off. You're a lot better off than you were when they brought you in here 2 weeks ago. I dropped my water cup and found my voice again. 2 weeks. It made my throat raw. What the? Please tell me you're fucking with me. Engelman gave me a sheepish look and explained. You presented with swelling of the brain and the bite was severely infected, and we thought it prudent to place you in a medically induced coma. I sat there and took in the news. I asked absent-mindedly for a phone to call Sophie or my folks. I called Sophie first. Tommy, she exclaimed, I'm already on my way with your parents. They called them. Then they called me as soon as you were awake. We chit-chat about how I was feeling and what all I couldn't remember. In less than 20 minutes, they all three burst into my room. It hurt to talk. Not much had changed since I was attacked. I was a missing person for a few days before everyone was sorted out. Then I asked Soph to close the door. Listen, it wasn't an animal. It was a woman that bit me. They looked at me sideways. Tommy, my mother cooed. I think they would be able to recognize if it was a person. Soph sat her hand on my head. I shook it under her fingernails for a refreshing scratch. That simple action soothed me. Ever since waking up, it had felt like my head was being split slowly in half. It felt like every muscle I had was stiff and sore. I had constantly felt on edge, and the attack from 2 weeks ago flashed through my mind. I could still see the woman's hunched back, the mania in her eyes, her jagged teeth. Wait, was it really a woman? My mother had a point. Maybe the doctors were right. Maybe it really was a rabid animal that had attacked me. My head pained me. My vision swam. I didn't know anymore. All I knew was that I felt happy with Sophie there, scratching my head. Everything's going to be all right, babe, she said. I closed my eyes. Thanks. Thanks for coming here so quickly. It's fine, Sophie said. You should really be thanking Dr. Engelman and the other doctors here. They saved you. We were scared to death, Tommy. We thought we'd lost you. I spent about a week here, waiting by your side.
I'm sorry.
Fuck, I'm so sorry. There's nothing to be sorry about, son, my father said. None of this is your fault. We're just glad you survived. The others weren't so lucky. The others? I croaked. My mother slapped my father's arm and said something to him in a hushed whisper, but he continued. There were a few other victims. Others around the area who got attacked by the same animal. 10 people died that night, maybe more. I recalled the scream I had heard on the night of the incident. So it had been another victim. That's terrible. Holy shit, I said. Sophie told me more. Word is that the doctor and his team proposed the same coma treatment for the others. Unfortunately, it wasn't as effective for them. Apparently, you were all in critical conditions, and the treatment was a Hail Mary that may or may not have worked. That's not what Dr. Engelman said, I stammered. She patted me on the head, ruffling my hair, comforting me. He was probably trying to lighten the load for you. You've been through a lot, babe. Don't worry about any of that, sweetie, my mother said soothingly. You're safe now, and that's all that matters. We don't have to worry about anything else. We were interrupted by someone knocking on the door. My father went to get it. It's Dr. Engelman, he said. They want to do a quick checkup to make sure you're all right. Hans, Soph, we have to wait outside. As a team of doctors began to file inside, bearing all sorts of notes and equipment, my mother and girlfriend got up to leave. Sophie gave me a quick hug, embracing me in my bed. She pecked me on my right cheek, and then she said something into my ear in a subtle, hushed whisper. 3 words. 3 words that sent a chill crawling down my spine. Don't trust him. My parents and Sophie left and Engelman came back into the room, a big grin across his face. You're feeling better, son. Quiet and ordeal you've been through. These are the sorts of things he said. He said they were conditionally releasing me, but wanted me to come back in a couple days for observation. I signed some forms. They gave me my things back. Engelman was there still grinning next to me the whole time, then finally said goodbye and disappeared into the labyrinthine green hallways of the hospital with his brown clipboard. Mom, Dad, and Sophie were waiting for me at the exit. We all hugged and Sophie kissed me. "I love you, son," my dad said. "I'm just glad you're all right." "I love you too, Dad," I said. "I just want to go home." Mom and Dad said goodbye and got into their white Chevy and drove away. Sophie and I got into her car and took off out into the night. It was dark outside and the moon was bright and full and round and white. 2 weeks, I thought. It feels like months have passed. It felt like time had no meaning anymore. I scratched behind my ear and looked at the hairs on my arm. They seemed darker than I remembered somehow. Sophie said how crazy everything was and how she'd thought I was dead. She started to cry, and I watched her wipe away tears glistening in the moonlight with her index finger. Her left hand stayed on the steering wheel, but I could see she clutched it tightly. It was dark in the apartment. The only light was that of the full moon pouring in through the bay windows. I didn't turn on the lights. For some reason, I didn't feel like it. Just threw my things on the floor and kicked off my boots. Sophie reached for the light switch, but I grabbed her hand. "Tommy," she said softly. Her cheeks were still wet from crying. "What are you doing?" "Sure," I said, and kissed her. My lips were still dry. She kissed me back hard and then held me, and in the darkness I couldn't quite tell, but it sounded like she was crying again. "I missed you so much," she said. I put my hands on her, and we kissed again. Her tongue was warm and soft in my mouth, and it tasted good. Like, really good. Have you ever had a steak that was so perfectly cooked that you had to resist from shoving the whole thing in your mouth? It was like that, only better. I couldn't help myself. I bit her tongue. "Ow!" Sophie screamed and jumped up. "What the fuck, Tommy?" I started apologizing profusely, tripping over my words as I took a gentle step towards her. "Babe, I don't know what, I mean I didn't. I dash as I kept walking towards her. I could feel myself wanting to bite into her flesh again. Oh God, it was overwhelming. I spent my entire consciousness trying to push it back down my throat. I don't even remember how I got her to sit back down again, but somehow we were back on the couch together. Close. Very close. It was like I could smell her heartbeat. It was right there, in her throat, and I needed it down mine. Something animalistic came from deep inside me, and I started ripping apart her skin, trying to get whatever it was I needed from her. I hear her screams for a moment, and then suddenly, they stopped. I wasn't even aware of what I was doing. It just felt right. The taste of her skin and the texture of her blood, and finally I knew why that woman attacked me like this. Oh shit. I don't know why that thought snapped me out of my craze, but suddenly, I sat back and looked at what I had done. There was Sophie, or what was left of Sophie, covered in dark red from my couch to my kitchen. I had done that. Yet, I felt almost nothing. I knew, deep inside me, that I should be panicking, hyperventilating, running screaming out of my building, but that part was silenced by everything else in me. I calmly stood up and walked into my bathroom. It was only when I looked in the mirror that I began to feel. There was my reflection, except it looked nothing like me at all. Suddenly, I had a huge mange of hair all over my chin, some covering the rest of my face. As I internalized what I saw, I raised my hand to feel my face and saw that my hand, too, was suddenly covered in more hair than a dog's tail. Then since that none of that, should have happened hit me all at once, and I began to freak out. I clawed my skin, wishing desperately to be who I was only last month, when Sophie and I were happy and together and alive and normal and it took what felt like forever for me to calm down. I'm still panicked. I'm still lost, but I made myself sit up and look back in the mirror. It was too much. Too much change. Too much hair. I know. It's fucked up to be sitting here worrying about a beard when my girlfriend's corpse and torn up in my living room. Nothing makes sense right now. Nothing has made sense since the night of the attack. I was going to turn myself in. I don't want to live like this, knowing what I did, knowing that I liked it. But there's only one thing that stopped me. Just a minute ago, I got a call from Dr. Engelman. With a shaky hand, I slipped my phone out of my back pocket and picked it up. But before I could even say anything, he whispered, "Shh, there's no time. I know what you just did. I know what you are. Don't worry. I'm coming. Just close all your blinds, all right? Don't let the moonlight in, and don't go outside. I'm coming." And with that, he hung up. So, what? I turn myself in, saying that I'm a werewolf now and be put in a mental hospital, or I wait here and hope that Dr. Engelman know what he's talking about. I could run away, but that only increases the risk that I'll hurt another person. To me, it seems that I only have one option. I can only hope it's the right one. Still, as I sit here, waiting, Sophie's words keep playing in my mind, like she was still whispering them into my ear at this very second. Don't trust him. Thanks a lot for watching the video till the end. Subscribe to our channel Horror in Detail. Drop your opinions/suggestions in the comments section, and like the video as it helps with the YouTube algorithm.